Take a moment and think. I want you to think back to the last time you felt really comforted. And I don't mean comfortable. I mean truly comforted. When was that? Remember that. What did it feel like? Why were you so comforted? What about it made you feel comforted? Were there people there? Were you warm? Maybe well fed? What about maybe you were wrapped in some kind of duvet, right? But when you really, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? But when we're wrapped up in something warm, cozy, right? Someone's there with us maybe. There are lots of ways that we can feel comfort, but I believe they have some things in common. I often feel comfort when I hear music, like I did today. Especially when I sing music with other people, you feel that sense of unity and comfort. Do you ever feel comfortable underwater? You go to a swimming pool, maybe you don't. Karen's shaking her head. She doesn't. Sometimes when I submerge underwater, I just wait there. It's so quiet. There's some noises and whatever, but everything is kind of muffled and kind of peaceful. Maybe not for Karen, but for me. And there's that sense of peace, that sense of sort of envelopment that I think can really be comforting. When my kids were growing up, and sometimes now, they're older now, but they used to get scared at night. And they would often come into our room and snuggle in with us to sleep. And that was something that they needed. When they needed some comfort, they would come to us, and we would cover them in a blanket, and we would cuddle with them. And then they would sleep like babies. Jordan and I wouldn't necessarily sleep like babies, but they would sleep like that because of this warmth, this comfort that they felt. Now, sometimes it was really important. My daughter, I asked her today if I could share this with you today, but growing up, she had pretty intense night terrors. And what that means is she would wake up, but not wake up. And she would scream loud and run around the house, terrified of we don't know what. And we would sit there and try to talk to her, and it often took 15, 20 minutes to calm her down. And it was really intense. we were very, it was troublesome, for sure. And she would wake up the next morning and be like, what? What happened? Why are you guys, what happened? And we were like, don't you remember? Sometimes she would punch us. It was intense. And apparently, so we went online and we were like, what's going on? Right? And I believe that maybe in the old days, people believed this was sort of some kind of demonic possession. And I'm being truthful about this. Like, that's what it looked like. And turns out this is a fairly common thing for kids. And the comforting thing that the internet said to us was, don't worry, they'll grow out of it by adolescence. Clementine was 5. And we were like, what? We have to deal with this until... So we learned some tricks and things that would help sort of stop the night terrors. But one of the things that when we were just at our wits' end, if we needed to, we would just, from the get-go, just say, you're sleeping with us tonight, so that we didn't have to deal with one. And without fail, every time she slept with us, no night terror. Every time. Every single time. There were other tricks, and we didn't do it every night because sometimes we wanted to sleep. But that comfort was so important. And as the kids got bigger, they would still come into our rooms, and they still do once in a while. They're 20, 17, and 13, but yeah, they'll come into our rooms once in a while. But we also learned something really interesting, because especially Kayla, our oldest, as he started to get really big, and we were in a queen bed for a long time, and we were like, this is not going to work. So we started a little practice where we kept a little sort of fold-out mattress near the bed. And if somebody needed to come in, we'd snuggle with them for a bit. But when it was time to sleep, we'd put them at the foot of the bed with a pillow and a blanket, and they would sleep. And oddly enough, sleeping in the room was enough to give them the comfort they needed. They didn't have to be right next to us. They just knew that we were close. And that worked. And now we finally got a king-size bed. So we could fit the whole family, you know? But now they don't need it as much. It's the irony of a growing family. But I want you to think about these things, about how we would comfort our kids with nightmares, and maybe some of the things that comforted you are the same things that we use to comfort babies. We swaddle them tightly. We feed them. We hold them, right? We rock them. We talk to them. We coo at them. All of these kinds of things that parents and caregivers and babysitters and whoever, people that know how to calm a baby, it's these same sort of comfort things that are often the things, you talk about getting wrapped in a duvet. It feels great. And the tighter, the better. Even when the kids grew up, they were like, "Daddy, make me a burrito." And that didn't mean cook me a burrito. It meant turn me into a burrito. And they loved it. They loved it because it's so comforting. And I think there's a really important reason for that. My mother's a psychologist, psychoanalyst, and one of the things that she studies is motherhood, parenthood, but particularly motherhood, and the relationship between mothers and children. She wrote a book called Maternal Subjectivity, and she talks about the experience of being a mother and what that is on a psychological level. And her next book, she just turned 80, by the way, and she's writing another book. I know, right? She's amazing. She's writing another book about the womb and about the relationship that happens between a mother and a child while they're in the womb. And one of the things that I noticed, and one of the things that you'll hear her, we heard her talk about this all growing up. It was 4 boys. She had 4 boys, and we heard about motherhood all the time. But it was a great thing. But one of the things that she talks about is the experience of being in the womb for a child. And it contains all of those things that we just talked about, the things that bring you comfort, are the things that you feel when you're in the womb. A baby is there, warm, protected, kind of squished in there. And that's why babies like to be swaddled so much. It reminds them of the safeness, the closeness that they have, inside their mother, who's not that big. The babies, when they get full sized, they're cramped in there. But the babies they love that, and they hear the sounds of their mother talking, and that's why a mother's voice often comforts a baby. The rocking sensation is because if a mother is walking, right, what happens to the baby in the womb? It gets rocked, right? And so this is a very powerful sensation that we have. And the things that help us feel that sense of comfort are often the things that make us feel like we're back in the womb. A good hot tub, that's it, right? A nice hot shower, right? Those things comfort us because they remind us, I believe, and if you hear my mom talk about it, she believes this too, that's one of the reasons they're so powerfully comforting to us. The scripture that is part of our theme of comfort today, I thought was lovely. As a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you. And I think that's a beautiful promise from God. God is going to womb us when we ask for it. I think that's a beautiful thing. Let's turn it into a verb. Because sometimes when we need that comfort, we need someone to womb us, to envelop us, to hug us, hold us. That's why somebody holding you is such a powerful way to feel comfort and to provide comfort. And I believe that this is reaching down not just to our experience of being in the womb, but something that's at the core of our eternality. It's an eternal truth. And that is something that we experience when we were in the womb. We don't really remember it. I think it's sort of a subconscious memory that we respond to, but we have a true sense of oneness when we're in the womb. Literally, mother and child are a single organism. If that's not oneness, I don't know what is. And I think that's a very powerful thing, because no other experience, physical experience, quite approximates that level of oneness on the physical level. And I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think it speaks to the very core of who we are. And almost every spiritual tradition that you can think of talks about this sense of unity with one another, with the universe, with God. And that's a central core piece of who we are. It's a part of our identity. But then we're born and we separate from our mothers. We separate as beings, and suddenly we are separate. And you're like, well, Matt, didn't you just say we're one? We're both. It's this beautiful dichotomy that we live in. But we are separate as we are one. Yes, I am separate from you, but also I'm not. And it's not something that is sometimes true and sometimes not true. It is something that is both and always true. I'm separate and one. Sometimes I'm in the experience of being separate, and sometimes I'm in the experience of being one. And when we are separate, I think that is when we are most in need of comfort, when we feel separate, when we feel alone, when we feel afraid, sad, angry. Those are things that separate us from other people. And that is often when we need comfort most. Yoda taught us this, one of my favorite spiritual teachers. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And that suffering, I think, is a result of us forgetting our oneness. Yes, the experience of being separate is important because it teaches us the meaning, the true blessing of the oneness that we also share. So let me talk about separateness for a second, because especially on a week like this, where there feels like there's a great divide in our country, there's a lot of separation, a lot of fear, a lot of anger, a lot of hate, a lot of suffering. These things are things that we can overcome by remembering our oneness. And it's sometimes it's a little bit alluring to think, okay, we can unite, because often we unite against a common enemy, and that feels good because we feel united with someone. But when you think about it, at its core, that's still separation from this common enemy. And what we want to do is widen our circle of compassion. Allow ourselves to love thine enemy. Love our enemy. That's what Christ taught. Love thine enemy. Because that is what happens. That's how we reunify. Even when somebody believes the exact opposite as you do. Love them. Be one with them. Because I believe that the comfort you feel when you are comforted, when you feel comforted, I believe that the source of that is the remembering of the truth of your identity, that we are one. And that's why when we feel those womb-like feelings, we're feeling at one with our mother, with God, with each other, with the universe. Those feelings are at oneness are the source of comfort. And often that's all we need is a sense of oneness to overcome that sense of separateness, that sense of loneliness. There's a guy on the internet, Simon Sinek. It's a wonderful teacher, leadership training. He has some wonderful, wonderful things to say. But he talks about this friend he has, and she had read a paper. There's a paper that said something to the effect of, when somebody's struggling, often all they need is 8 minutes worth of support from a friend. And they can usually get back on track, right? Now there may be more, it's an average of 8, sometimes more, sometimes less. But about 8 minutes is enough to really just calm someone down and get them sort of on the right track. Because when you think about it, if you're visiting with someone who's really in distress, the core comforting time is really not that long. Once you sort of get through that 8 minutes, you spend time and you sort of talk and enjoy each other's company, but really that core crisis is not always that long. Now, there are exceptions. Don't pretend that this is the gospel. But what he did was set up this code between him and this dear friend of his. And when they needed each other, they would text each other and just say, "Do you have 8 minutes?" Isn't that beautiful? Do you have 8 minutes? They didn't have to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm struggling, I'm falling apart, blah, 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 blah," because that was enough to just say, "I need some comfort. I need 8 minutes." And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so when you feel separate, feel alone, feel hate, feel anger, feel sadness, feel loss, when you're in mourning, ask your friends for 8 minutes. Let them come and comfort you. Let yourself feel that oneness with your friends, your family, whoever you can. Ask God for 8 minutes. I bet God can spare 8 minutes. And then you say, "Okay, but Matt, sometimes I feel like I don't have a friend. Or God doesn't answer my prayers. God doesn't talk to me." These things are real feelings. So what do I do when I don't feel like I have somebody that can come and give me 8 minutes? 8 minutes of oneness. 8 minutes of unity. Well, that's when we turn to our spiritual practice. Every spiritual practice that you've ever heard talked about, at least here, and in most spiritual traditions, have to do with uniting us with each other, or with God, or with nature, meditation, prayer, gratitude. Think about what you feel when you feel true gratitude for something or someone. And tell me that doesn't feel like unity. That's what it feels like to me. But there's another very powerful, powerful practice. A powerful key to the experience of oneness. And that is kindness. An act of love. Many of you have heard me say my favorite definition of love is the one that Eckhart Tolle talks about, which is the felt realization of oneness. And when we are kind to a person, we usually think of our kindness comes out of love. That is, when I feel love towards a person, I act kindly towards them. Generally, right? Because I feel that sense of oneness. I believe that when I'm kind to someone else, that they are a part of me, right? We feel it with our friends. We feel it with our family, right? When I'm kind to a member of my family, it feels like I'm being kind to me. That's that reflexive nature of kindness. But there's a really interesting, special thing about kindness. Love motivates kindness, but kindness also generates love. By being kind to someone, your body responds in the mode of love, in the mode of oneness. And when you're kind to even a stranger, somebody who you don't necessarily quote unquote love, that kindness creates love inside of you. The experience, the felt realization of oneness happens inside of you just by being kind. And the beautiful thing about this is when you comfort someone else, you comfort yourself. You feel comfort. That's the miracle. So when you are at a loss, you have no friends to ask 8 minutes of, then find someone to give 8 minutes to. And the result will be the feeling of oneness, and the feeling of oneness will bring you comfort. Test me. You'll find out that I'm right. Now, this has been studied too. Kindness releases oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, all of the feel-good hormones and chemicals in our body are all released when we act kindly towards another person. I find that fascinating and interesting. And while we think, okay, this is some sort of adaptive response to kindness, evolution wanted us to work as a team and to be, cooperate with one another. So it rewards us for those times when we're kind and when we help one another. But I believe that it's speaking to the core truth, which I always come back to, and that is oneness. And that our body is responding to that feeling of oneness. And that feeling engenders all of these pleasurable things. Oxytocin is the love hormone. Do you know what that's most important for? It does a lot of things. But one of them is parent-child bonding. Merging of parent and child in a relationship of love, of the felt realization of oneness. Because I tell you, when my kid hurts, I hurt. Right? But it happens to us with friends, with romantic partners, with family. Right? And when your friends hurt, you hurt. That's because of this truth of our oneness. So I encourage you to reach out, to send to receive. Send comfort to receive comfort. It's something that we don't generally think of, but boy, oh boy, it works. Now, there are some people that send too much comfort. You know who you are. Usually they're called mother. But it's a title that's not only reserved for women. Anybody that you know those people that sacrifice too much? They're so self-sacrificing that they deplete themselves of their reserves. And it's hard. And yeah, moms do it a lot. But anybody that's giving too much and they start to deplete themselves, what do? Because sometimes sending comfort in that situation might not do the trick. I've got a solution for that too. Isn't that great? Today I've got answers. Here's the beautiful thing. Sending comfort still produces comfort, but you can send it to yourself. This is what is encapsulated by this great truth that Jesus taught. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That doesn't just mean love thy neighbor as if they were yourself. Love both. Love your neighbor. Treat your neighbor with the same love that you would treat yourself, but don't forget to treat yourself with love. Offer yourself comfort. Care for yourself. Stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you love you. Wrap yourself in a blanket. Do the things that need, when you need comfort yourself too. And you will be sending that comfort out, but to you. It's sort of this beautiful, miraculous thing. But love creates love. Kindness creates kindness. Kindness toward yourself creates the same response as kindness to another person. But it has to be true kindness. Because sometimes we're like, I should eat better. I should this. I should that. I should, do self-care. But when it feels like guilt, that's not kindness. But when you do it because I love this, I love me. Let me treat myself with comfort. Let me wrap myself, let me womb myself, at least for 8 minutes when you're in a tough spot, but do it more. Because these same people that studied all the chemicals that get released by kindness, they made an interesting point in this article I was reading, that when you do one act of kindness toward yourself or to someone else, you get 2 to 4 minutes of oxytocin and good feeling. Well, you can't sustain a day on that. right? It requires practice. It needs to be a practice of kindness to others, to yourself. Acts of love. And you will have a steady supply of these feel-good hormones. And what a wonderful thing to become addicted to kindness. And what kind of comfort will you be able to provide to your community, to your family, to your friends, and to yourself? That's the beautiful, beautiful thing about this, is that these acts of love are reflexive. You cannot love someone else without generating love inside yourself. And both grow. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I want to offer one quote from Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God, one of my favorite books. And Neil says, the best way to experience power, or anything, is to give it away. Make someone else powerful and you become twice as powerful as you were before. Make someone else loved. He didn't say this, but comforted. And you become twice as loved, twice as comforted. It doesn't get any better than this. And it's all so simple. My mother believes that our desire for heaven is a desire to return to the womb because we want to feel wombed. And so I believe if you send to receive, send comfort into the world so that you will receive it. As you do so, God will envelop you in a womb of oneness, and it will be lots longer than 8 minutes. There you will find heaven on earth.